This presentation provides an overview of the key Environment Effects Statements findings for the Fingerboards Mineral Sands project. The Environment Effects Statement, or EES, presents the findings of the assessment of potential positive and negative impacts of the project. The full EES findings are contained in the EES report and supporting technical studies. Through the EES process, Kalbar has addressed the scoping requirements for the project issued by the Minister for Planning. Kalbar has addressed issues relevant to key statutory decisions, including mining approvals under the Victorian Mineral Resources Sustainable Development Act 1990 and Commonwealth approvals under the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act 1999. Kalbar has identified, assessed and evaluated the project's potential direct and indirect effects associated with the construction, operation and closure phases on environmental and socio-economic values, and identified opportunities and methods to avoid, mitigate or manage effects. Kalbar has also informed and sought feedback from the public and stakeholders, including the Technical Reference Group, which is a group of government agency representatives appointed by the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning to provide guidance and feedback on the EES technical studies. The EES assessments demonstrate that the project would achieve the evaluation objectives set out in the scoping requirements, the project objectives, the policy objectives for mineral sands exploration and mining in Victoria, and the relevant provisions set out under the Mineral Resources Sustainable Development Act 1990. In addition, the EES demonstrates that the potential environmental impacts of the project can be effectively managed by implementing the project's Environmental Management Framework, or EMF. The scoping requirements include 8 evaluation objectives for the EES: resource development, biodiversity, water, catchment values and hydrology, amenity and environmental quality, social, land use and infrastructure, landscape and visual, cultural heritage, and mine closure. These objectives have guided the preparation of the EES and informed the assessment of impacts and development of mitigation measures to avoid, reduce and manage potential project impacts on environmental, social and cultural values. The objective is to achieve the best use of available mineral sands resources in an economic and environmentally sustainable way, including while maintaining viability of other local industries. Victoria is a proven mineral sands province that provides a valuable contribution to the Australian mineral sands industry. Victorian government policy encourages the sustainable exploitation of such resources. The project is a significant opportunity to further enhance the mineral sands industry in Victoria and to grow the Victorian and East Gippsland economies by creating significant new opportunities for employment and procurement. The Fingerboards resource has some of the highest grades of zircon currently known, with the project ranked very highly compared to both existing and undeveloped mineral sands projects globally. The global zircon market is forecast to grow at over 2.5% per year over the next 10 years, with a predicted supply gap. The project will help to close this gap and generate an estimated total net economic benefit to Victoria of $392.4 million in net present value terms. This value includes $158.9 million in direct benefits to the state of Victoria and $234.4 million in indirect benefits associated with higher wages and benefits to Victorian suppliers. Over its 15 years of operations, the project is projected to increase gross regional product in the East Gippsland region by just over $1.4 billion in net present value terms. The objective is to avoid or minimise potential adverse effects on native vegetation, listed threatened and migratory species and ecological communities, and habitat for these species, as well as address offset requirements for residual environmental effects consistent with state and Commonwealth policies. Biodiversity values within the project area have been highly modified by past activities, principally forestry and agriculture. Most of the project area is dominated by pasture, supporting non-Indigenous grasses and weeds. Less than 30% of the project area supports remnant native vegetation, with small fragmented patches restricted to gullies and road reserves. Key biodiversity values identified in the project area include one nationally listed threatened ecological community, the Gippsland red gum grassy woodland and associated native grassland, This community is listed as critically endangered under the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act 1999, or EPBC Act. 2 nationally significant fauna species were recorded in the project area and surrounds: the grey-headed flying fox and the Australian greyling. Both species are listed as vulnerable under the EPBC Act. 1 EPBC Act listed migratory species was recorded, the rufous fantail. Other important fauna species present in the project area include the eastern long-necked turtle and emu, both regionally significant, and the state-significant yellow-bellied sheath-tail bat. 4 state-significant flora species were recorded, no nationally listed species, including 2 listed as rare. 11 ecological vegetation classes were recorded. The key biodiversity values outside the project area, which could be impacted by project activities, are associated with the Gippsland Lakes, a Ramsar site. Residual impacts from the project, after implementation of mitigation measures committed to in the EMF, are predicted to be largely at the local level and not significant at a national or state level. Kalbar will develop a detailed vegetation offset management strategy in accordance with Commonwealth and state requirements. The Gippsland Lakes Ramsar site is located approximately 25 kilometres from the project area and will not be directly impacted by the loss of vegetation or habitat. Potential indirect impacts to the Gippsland Lakes include changes to habitat conditions due to sedimentation and alteration of water quality, and water inflows and availability. Modelling studies predicted no adverse impacts from project activities to the Mitchell River or Perry River. These rivers both empty into water bodies in the Gippsland Lakes Ramsar site. Therefore, the lakes are unlikely to be adversely impacted as a result of the project. The objective is to minimise effects on water resources and on beneficial and licensed uses of surface water, groundwater, and related catchment values, including the Gippsland Lakes Ramsar site, over the short and long term. The EES identifies current and future beneficial and licensed uses of surface water and groundwater in the project area. Downstream water resources and catchment values are also identified and include the Mitchell River, Perry River, Providence Ponds, and Lake King and Lake Wellington, part of the Ramsar-listed Gippsland Lakes site. Surface water and groundwater extraction to supply the project's water needs will meet the conditions, timing and limits detailed in licences issued by Southern Rural Water. Groundwater mounding and drawdown of groundwater levels as a result of project activities are not expected to affect the availability of groundwater to licensed users. All residual risks from extraction to water resource values have been assessed as very low to low. The project will be managed to maximise the efficiency of water use, prevent off-site release of stormwater from mining areas, maintain environmental flows in watercourses through clean water diversions. Project activities are not expected to significantly affect the beneficial uses of surface water, with the exception of a moderate risk to the Perry River catchment in the event of a failure of the temporary tailings storage facility. This facility will be designed, constructed and operated in accordance with the relevant guidelines, and the likelihood of a failure occurring is rare. Water storage dams and tailings storage facility containment cells will be lined to minimise potential for contamination and the risk to beneficial users of groundwater. The project will manage surface water extraction to maintain the minimum flow requirements in the Gippsland Lakes Ramsar site to protect the health and function of this ecosystem, and as such, no adverse impacts are expected to the aquatic ecosystems of this site. Surface water and groundwater monitoring programs will be implemented for the life of the project and for a time after closure of the mine. If monitoring indicates that performance requirements are not being achieved, corrective actions, such as immediately stopping project activities, will be enacted. The objective is to protect the health and well-being of residents and local communities, and minimise effects on air quality, noise, and the social amenity of the area, having regard to relevant limits, targets, or standards. Changes to air quality and the existing noise environment have the potential to impact on the health and well-being of people and the general amenity of where they live. The air quality modelling and impact assessment predicted that air quality criteria may be exceeded at some sensitive receptors under certain weather conditions. Kalbar will perform real-time monitoring close to sensitive receptors and/or in other representative locations most likely to experience the highest levels of particulates. Kalbar will cease dust-generating activities when the monitoring results indicate potential for exceedances to air quality criteria. Project-generated greenhouse gas emissions were estimated on an annual basis for construction, operation and closure. Over its lifetime, the project is anticipated to use just over 9 million gigajoules of energy and emit 1,074 kilotons of greenhouse gas. The maximum annual greenhouse gas emissions represent 0.02 and 0.07% respectively of national and state annual greenhouse gas emissions. The noise modelling predicted exceedances of noise criteria during the evening and night periods at some noise-sensitive residences, without specific mitigation. With mitigation strategies in place, such as careful scheduling of high noise activities, physical screening, such as earth bunds, the modelling predicts that the project noise levels will comply with relevant guidelines for all project phases. Additional B-double trucks introduced on local roads due to the project are predicted to noticeably increase noise levels, but will remain below the relevant noise threshold criteria. The preferred transport option, a private haulage road within the infrastructure corridor to the Fernbank East rail siding, was found to affect fewer noise-sensitive receptors and presents more practical opportunities for noise mitigation, which would not be practical along public roads. Predicted vibration levels from heavy machinery used during the construction and operation of the project were determined to be well below the relevant guidelines and will not significantly impact any sensitive receptors. The change in land use from agriculture to mining could raise concerns about health effects to nearby residents, which in turn could lead to increased stress levels in some community members. Potential exposure of people in and around the project area to contaminants in the air, groundwater and surface water, soil or sediments, was found to be not substantially different to established baseline conditions. The Human Health Risk Assessment concluded that the risk profile is low and acceptable. The objective is to minimise potential adverse social and land use effects, including on agriculture, such as dairy, irrigated horticulture and grazing, forestry, tourism industries and transport infrastructure. The community who live and work close to the proposed mine value the project area and surrounds for providing quiet and peaceful rural living and largely low levels of noise, dust and artificial light. The project will change the setting and landscape of the local area from that dominated by agriculture to mining. There are also some community and stakeholder concerns about the impact of the project on the nearby vegetable growing areas of the Lindenau Valley. Mine activities and progressive rehabilitation will be scheduled to reduce as much as possible the area of agricultural land disturbed at any one time. Post-closure rehabilitation will aim to restore land to pre-mining land use, or an alternative use as agreed with the landholder. The specific measures identified in the EMF to minimise visual, noise and dust impacts will also help to manage potential impacts on social values, and Kalbar will continue to communicate and engage with affected communities. Dust deposition modelling indicated that the deposition rates within horticultural production areas complied with relevant air quality criteria. Local vegetable growers were also concerned about the potential loss of produce value and market due to damage to the region's reputation for producing high-quality produce. Analysis of public perceptions and buying habits indicated that the residual risk of potential losses of value and income as a result of the project is low. The project will include a number of changes to the road network, including upgrades and relocations of existing roads and some intersections. Where roadworks associated with the project require road closures, Kalbar will work in consultation with East Gippsland Shire Council and Vic Roads to determine alternate routes that provide the public with adequate access at all times. In operations, the preferred transport option avoids the risk to pedestrians and other road users from heavy vehicles transporting the heavy mineral concentrate. Some sections of the road network and intersections are currently substandard. Works proposed as part of the project to some roads, rail crossings and intersections will mean the upgraded infrastructure will be able to meet current standards. Overall, the works will provide a safer transport network for the communities in the project area. The objective is to avoid adverse effects on the landscape and recreational values of the Mitchell River National Park and minimise visual effects on the open space areas. The project area is located within a highly modified agricultural setting, with grazing, cropping and forestry activities, as well as power lines, sealed and unsealed roads, and scattered farm buildings. The EES incorporates a qualitative visual impact assessment to evaluate the level of visual modification at sensitive viewpoints due to project activities. For 6 sensitive viewpoints near the project area, the potential visual impact will be moderate to high at full development of the project and/or when activities are occurring near the viewpoint. The potential visual impact at these viewpoints will be temporary and progressively reduces as activities move away. Once the mine void is backfilled and overburdened stockpiles are reshaped, the potential visual impact will be reduced to moderate to low. Rehabilitation activities, including re-establishment of vegetation, will further reduce the residual impact over time. Although some impacts from the project to visual amenity will occur, the project will be managed to avoid adverse effects on the landscape and recreational values of the Mitchell River National Park, and minimise visual effects on the open space areas surrounding the project. The objective is to avoid or minimise adverse effects on Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal cultural heritage. Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal cultural heritage values within the project area are associated with known as well as unknown places. One scar tree, previously destroyed by fire, is listed on the Victorian Aboriginal Heritage Register. 3 recorded Aboriginal sites were identified within the project area. Field surveys identified 68 previously unrecorded surface stone artefacts. All of the registered and recorded Aboriginal cultural heritage sites will be impacted by the construction and operation of the project. Based on predictive modelling, unknown Aboriginal cultural heritage sites are also highly likely to be present in the project area and will be impacted during construction and operations. Mitigation measures to be implemented by Kalbar will include developing an approved Cultural Heritage Management Plan and a Chance Fines Protocol, and providing cultural heritage training to all personnel. The residual risks associated with impacts on known Aboriginal cultural heritage are moderate and high for disturbance or destruction of the Fingerboards artefact scatter. The objective is to establish safe, progressive, rehabilitation and post-closure stable rehabilitated landforms capable of supporting native ecosystems and/or productive agriculture that will enable long-term sustainable use of the project area. The project is expected to have 2 active mine voids of less than 60 hectares each at any one time. Progressive rehabilitation will occur behind the active mining areas. On average, 80 hectares of rehabilitation is expected to be carried out each year. The time from overburden stripping to completion of rehabilitation and re-establishment of agricultural land use is expected to be between 3 and 5 years. Key risk factors that will influence the success of rehabilitation in the project area include erosion and revegetation fail due to factors such as drought and/or the presence of mining contaminants in soil. Proposed mitigation will be effective in managing residual risks to successful rehabilitation to a low to very low level, with the exception of geotechnical risks associated with damage to roads and slope or road pillar collapse, which are moderate to high due to the extreme consequence if they occur. The Fingerboards Mineral Sands project will be designed, constructed and maintained in accordance with the project's environmental management framework. The framework identifies the required roles and responsibilities for implementation, details of the key statutory approvals and consents required for the project, compliance obligations, environmental risk assessment, requirements for management plans and sub-plans, and procedures setting out the specific detail of how activities and controls are to be undertaken. The EES provides an integrated assessment of the potential environmental and socio-economic impacts of the project. While there are unavoidable high risks associated with biodiversity loss, these can be effectively offset in accordance with government policy and guidelines. Residual risks associated with other environmental and social aspects can be managed and mitigated to minimise potential impacts through the implementation of the Environmental Management Framework. More detailed information about the EES findings will be available in the EES report and technical studies. If you have any questions about the information provided in this presentation or would like more information about specific findings of the EES, please contact Kalbar.